dog trainers do in between appointments.
Right.
Hi guys, welcome back.
Hey, welcome back.
I feel like I'm always wearing the same outfit for our podcast.
Yeah, pretty much the same for me as well.
I have the same work outfits that I just rotate through. And every podcast video I watch, I'm like, wow, that flannel again.
So what's the topic today?
Today we're talking about, we're kind of branching off of our why is your dog not listening to you discussion we talked about last time, and moving more into like more nuanced levels of it. I think a common thing we hear a lot is like, oh, my dog is just being stubborn, that's why they're not listening. Maybe there's some like overshadowing that's happening with your cues you're giving your dog. Maybe there's not enough clarity in the command. Maybe they're in an environment that's too distracting for their proficiency level. So we're going to kind of dive into all of that.
Okay.
Start us off, guys.
Where do you want to start? With the stubbornness?
Yeah, so we hear a lot from clients like, oh, my dog was just being stubborn in XYZ scenario. We wanted to kind of delve into what could be viewed as stubbornness and how to work past that with your dog, so you're not feeling like because your dog is in a bad mood or they're being stubborn that we have to stop working through things.
Mm-hmm.
So, in terms of dealing with certain situations, I think one big factor is the situation in which the dog is in and how they kind of respond to certain commands and everything. I know that when I'm working with like more of a stubborn dog and everything, a lot of it also has to do with communication, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe the communication isn't really absolutely clear to them in the sense of what they are doing as opposed to what they should be doing, right? But it's hard because like with stubborn, I think it also gets kind of grouped into other things as well, like that, like miscommunication or something, or like being confused. I know a lot of people are like, they always ask me, are they being stubborn or are they confused, right? Mm-hmm. And that's a big question I ask them a lot as well. So
or do they just like not know the command?
Right. Yes. Right. And so it's something that I think in terms of communication, obviously one big thing to kind of like work on to diminish the stubbornness between the dogs. What do you guys think?
I think that one thing to keep in mind is that sometimes I think we expect our dogs to like learn very quickly with things. So it's like if we've been working on, I've even seen like in some sessions I've done, like halfway through the session, say we're just working on sit, and they've nailed like 10 sits in a row, and then all of a sudden the 11th sit they don't do it, and you have to like help them with leash pressure, do something. And if that pattern keeps happening, a lot of owners will be like, why are they doing that?
Yeah.
They're being stubborn. They know better at this point. They know the command. When in reality, they just don't.
Yeah.
Like, it takes a lot of repetition for a dog to really grasp something and to like learn a conditioned behavior. So I think in those situations, you just need to remember that your dog is still learning. And then I think another context it could be is that just the lack of clarity in the communication. So I think overshadowing your cues is probably the biggest reason that happens. Is like so basically what overshadowing is when you are giving multiple cues to the dog at one time, even if you're not aware of it, they're going to pick up on the most dominant one. So like if I say sit while at the same time pulling a treat up into the air, the dog is not even really going to hear the word sit at that point. They're just going to cue off of like, oh, there's a food coming up. And then that means if I sit, I know that I get that food. A lot of people will do that, or they'll do like the pointing.
Yeah, they'll do pointing.
Yeah, the snapping. Yeah. Like all of those things are, again, not necessarily bad to use if your dog understands what they mean. It's just you can't overlay them at the same time as a verbal cue if that's what you want your dog to learn. And then be frustrated that the dog isn't responding to just the verbal cue.
Yeah.
So there has to be some separation there. So like if a dog, for instance, does respond to like some weird hand signal for sit, and you want to teach the verbal cue, you can use classical conditioning and just say sit, and then the dog will learn sit, and then this help exactly is tied to this, and then that puts you into the sit and a whole thing. I generally would just use leaf pressure, but that's beyond the point. So I think that is probably a cause of lack of clarity at times. So making sure that you're being more intentional with what you're cueing your dog with. And then I would say just lack of follow through in general and holding the dog accountable is another way to confuse your dog.
Like motivating as well, like what levels are proficient or good enough for you to get in through your training in your house may not be high enough or low enough outside. So we have to take into account that if we're practicing our commands outside or at a distracting location, that level may need to adjust. And it's often, in my experience, needing to be a lot higher of a level because we're battling the dog's focus with all the outside stimuli.
Yep.
If your dog is proficient enough, I feel like it's totally okay to start incorporating it outside, but a little bit of a process behind that as well. Where I wouldn't take a dog I just taught sit today to the park and expect him to do perfectly.
At least without additional help.
Yes.
You know?
Right. Yeah, like it's one thing once you kind of establish some of the rule and then bring them to that environment to kind of work through it because you know it's an issue or whatever, you know there's going to be maybe not an issue, but more distraction, more stimulation, right? As opposed to being in the house, but it's something that, you know, like we have to make sure, again, that line of communication, the understanding of the command is open first and understood, and then we can start doing it, because I think that's definitely a big thing that with the boarding trains, at least, you know, they work on stuff here, we do the send home, and they go home, and like you were saying as well, like the proficiency of like keeping up with it as well. You know, understandably, people have lives. Like these owners have lives. They, you know, they're not coming to work with their dog. You know what I mean? So it is different, but it's something that keeping up with it is a big part of it, because then you come back for follow up and they're like, well, you know, like he just seems like he's like he's being stubborn at home and he doesn't really want to do it, and part of it I think also has to do with maybe a little bit of kind of baiting the dog a little like too much, where you're like, well, you know, he didn't seem to really want to do it, so I wasn't really forcing him to do it.
Yeah, he didn't want to do it.
Right, and it's just like,
yeah.
And so I think that's another big thing where, you know, you definitely have to keep up with that, like that structure, and letting them know that it's like, listen, when I don't care, be as stubborn as you want, do whatever you want, but when I need you to do it, that's when I just need you to do it, right? And you kind of need to just suck it up for that one moment or whatever, 5 minutes that I'm asking you to hold that duration so that I can do what I need to do, you know?
Yeah, and there are times where things could be a little bit of a struggle in training. It's not all supposed to be like a cakewalk. And I feel like when people reach a struggle, they're like, I've done something wrong. And of course, we don't want multiple sessions, multiple days in a row to be a struggle, but it's fairly normal every now and then, especially in the process of teaching, that things are going to be repetitive or things aren't going to go as smoothly as you hope. And we can still help the dog work through them if our clarity is really good, our motivation is really good, and we're offering help if the dog is in the stage of needing the help. Not to say that if your dog is really practiced at this, that we can go out to a park and not hold them accountable for sitting. So it's kind of where your dog's in the training process and how much distraction work you've implemented, how proficient you feel they are in the command at home and their natural settings.
Yeah, I would say that, and it was funny because when I was with Senny, just right before this, we were talking about it, but a lot of times, like with my clients, the way that I'll break down, like working on the commands is like the first initial stage is like the tons of repetition stage, where we're just conditioning in the word with the behavior. And once we're able and confident that the dog can hear the word and execute the behavior, and you see that click for them them and they're like, I know exactly what that word means, got it, and we're not doing a lot of helping, then you can start to focus on like your 3 D's of like distance, duration, distraction with the commands. And I usually have people focus on 1 D per session that they're doing. So it's like, if we're at the point the dog knows the bed command and they can execute it brilliantly, now we're going to say, okay, for this session, we're working distance. So I'm not doing a lot of distraction and I'm not doing a long duration necessarily. We're just putting the dog on the bed. I'll walk out of the room and I'll come back. I will walk over there and then I'll come back. You know, I'll do these longer distances and just really drill basically that concept the whole session. And then maybe another session, we're going to do just distractions. So I'm not going to necessarily have the dog hold it for absurdly long periods of time. And I'm not going to walk super far away. We're just going to have the kids running around the house and like stuff going on. And I'll just be right next to the dog, able to help them if they need it, because that's a little bit more difficult. And then maybe the next session, we're going to do duration. I put the dog on the bed, and then we sit down and we eat dinner, or we watch TV or whatever, and they're there for 30 minutes, 45 minutes. And once you're able to tackle all of those individually, then you can start to combine them all together. Where it's like, okay, the dog is on the bed for 30 minutes while I'm all the way in the kitchen cooking, and the kids are running around.
And I think it helps owners a lot, I'm sure, with pinpointing exactly where the dog struggles the most with it.
Right? That's good. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. So it's something that then you can just focus on that again more so, you know.
Look at those like baby steps involved in things, and you can think like, what stage is my dog at and how do I work them, rather than, I feel like your point earlier is people go into it really fast and then they expect their dog to perform these behaviors and they end up feeling extremely discouraged in the session because their dog did not meet their expectations. And sometimes it takes like a recalibrating of the session and a little bit of reflecting, like what went wrong, what could go better next time, and how can I improve it moving forward. And that can be a little bit difficult in the process, but it's very essential to pushing and growing your dog in any environment you'd like it to be in.
And most dogs aren't stubborn.
That's why I keep using like the air quotes. It's
like true, like I feel the same way about the word stubborn that I do aggressive. Like there's just like very few dogs that are
that's what I mean. I think
actually
it's a very
stubborn.
like common word to use that kind of incorporates a lot of different things that people just like chalk it up as being stubborn. Right?
They exist. I've met them. They definitely exist. I have one. But like there's you need to rule out all the other causes of it before you can really decide like, okay, that dog's just stubborn and
Like
truly doesn't want to do it.
It's a very human emotion, and we often humanize our dogs way too much, and then we're like, why aren't you acting like a human? And you have to realize like it's a dog. And I don't believe dogs are ever doing it in most of the cases, not doing anything intentionally to make you angry. Or they're not like crossing their arms and be like, I'm not sitting today. It's there's some kind of
disconnect there.
Yes.
Because it's like, I mean, say for instance, like you have a dog that you think is stubborn on their recall. Maybe you should analyze, when are you recalling them? Are you recalling them every time they want to go sniff that corner of the yard or explore or go after a ball? Or like, are you only recalling them in situations where they're like, I want to go do that thing. And then not allowing them like, of course, like safe settings, and I'm talking about safe things, but like if you're constantly interrupting something they really enjoy with a command that you don't use in any other context, then they probably are going to be like, I hate that. I don't want to do that. You know, the same way that like if you put a muzzle on a dog only right before they go to the vet, the muzzle starts becoming the association and the trigger for like, I'm going to get stressed and panicked and uncomfortable.
Or the crate, you know.
So it's like, you kind of have to analyze a little bit too. Like if your dog is being stubborn in certain contexts, like what am I doing with my commands relationship wise with my dog to create that type of environment where they don't want to listen to me.
And how engaged is your dog with you, which is huge. Like we saw an example of that we saw the other days at the trainer's night. My dog had no engagement with me. And she was just completely off, and we had to take a step back, and I looked at that situation and said her food drive wasn't good enough. She was maybe a little bit too distracted to perform what I'd like her to do. So we took a step back, worked on getting her nice and engaged with me. And I did that through adjusting her food drive a little bit and working her at times that she was able to focus on me. And that kind of built our relationship back up. I was able to use her dinner and her food as her biggest motivator. So I'm not calling her out of situations like playing with my other dog constantly. We're doing more livable sessions in the house, and using a lot of heavy reward because that really truly worked for her.
Yeah, like does your dog enjoy being around you? Like that's a huge piece of like success.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, it's like are you a pleasant person to be around when you're with your dog, or are you always frustrating? Are you always putting them? And I actually have a client I'm working with right now that I have a session with this evening that I was going to talk to because I think I figured out she's been having a lot of like ups and downs with her dog's reactivity with walking. And we hit a really good piece where like things were going really well. And then she just messaged me and said that she had a couple of really bad walks. And I think what might be happening is she's working on it too much. And I know that might sound weird, but I think what might be happening, because she's so dedicated. She's like one of the most dedicated people I've ever worked with. She's on top of it. She does everything. Like, she's amazing. And her dog is making really good progress. But I'm almost wondering if the dog is just getting burnt out, because she'll literally take this dog on like, I think she goes every single day. Yeah. If not twice a day on walks. And I'm almost wondering if like we're hitting these really good strides and then we get these bad moments because the dog's like, I can't do it anymore. Well, and it's also
I need a break. Like, is she working it to a point that like she's almost wanting it to happen? You know what I mean? Like not
sure.
You know what I mean? Like in the sense of like you're doing these really long walks every day,
like super tons of distractions.
Almost looking for the dog to do it. Right?
Yeah,
and not being like, hey, you know what? This week we went on 3 walks and really good. Let's just chill and relax for a few days, and we'll try it again next week. Right?
Yeah. So I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No.
Because what I was thinking of telling her was like, maybe we go on like 2 really tough walks a week, like to really busy parks and stuff. And then like if you just really love going for walks, you can still walk with her, but pick like pretty low difficulty.
Have it more enjoyable.
Yeah, really low difficulty walks so that like we're giving her like decompression time in between like the really, really tough stuff. Because I've been racking my brain. I'm like, what could it be? You know what I mean? Because I'm like, what's happening that like things are going really good and then we're hitting these rough spots and then really good for a while. And I truly think maybe the dog, because we see it sometimes with like daycare, dogs that come to daycare too much. Yeah. They just get burnt out and then they get grumpy and they don't want to, stuff like that. So I'm wondering if that's kind of part of the piece of it.
Sometimes people, if they're working on a specific issue, which trainers can sometimes be guilty of too, is that we try to chase down that dog on walks. And we're like, we gotta walk by this dog, and then you're constantly putting your dog in. Well, why it's good to do that and expose them, we have to think, are there other areas in which the dog is displaying these really high arousal behaviors that we can also get on? So not only addressing it outside of the house, but inside of the house, are they barking out the window? Are they going nuts when the mailman comes to the door? And reactivity can sometimes just be a symptom of a larger problem. Yeah. At times. So it's kind of like finding a balance of making your sessions still enjoyable and doable for your dog, like hitting results that you'd like to have. So not making every session like the most difficult going into war session.
Yeah, because then it's like every time your dog's with you, they're like, here we go again. Where sometimes you just need to let them like have like success
Yeah.
and like be easy.
Yeah.
Go for a walk, never see a dog. It was a beautiful walk.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or the only
at that
dog
point
you
then
saw.
Yeah, sorry.
No,
That
you're
point
fine.
you're just
You
focusing
me
on the
when I
walk.
interrupted
It's
you
okay.
earlier.
I know I'd forget it if I didn't. It's something where you're able to walk or focus on the actual walk. So it's really you're doing the same thing, but focusing on a different aspect of it, right?
Yeah.
Whereas like where maybe that client is, she's going on the walks and structuring the heel command and doing all that stuff, I'm sure, but she's doing it to kind of work through the reactivity, right? And it's something, I think that's kind of what you were getting at, is just like, take a break from that thing and focus just on the walk. Make that like good. Maybe it's something where just working on that and focusing on it will even clean up some of the heel and the come command and everything, you know? So I think that's definitely a good thing to at least try, you know, and see if that's kind of where things are getting dicey.
It's like,
It's like one of those situations where you're just laying in bed at night and you're like, why can't I figure this out?
how can I make it better? How can I help?
Yeah.
And there's a sort of creativeness that trainers need to have.
I'm thinking about your dogs all the time.
Yeah.
If you're one of my clients, I'm constantly thinking about your dog,
I know.
trying to figure
Like
stuff
I'm
out.
trying to sleep. I'm trying to enjoy my off day. I'm like, you know, it could really help. It's amazing.
We take your stress too, you know, so we get it, you know.
We want to help you with your problems so
Yes.
you feel like you can really enjoy your dog.
Yes.
Because I really enjoy my dogs. And
Yes.
I didn't always.
Yes. No, I think that might be one of the biggest pieces of like success with your dog is you need to figure out a way to make it enjoyable majority of the time.
Yeah.
Like tough moments are fine. That's inevitable. And tough like spans of time is inevitable where you're kind of tackling the same issue and it feels like it's just like, why aren't we getting anywhere with this? But again, within that, you need to find pockets of like joy with your dog
Find
because
something that they're really good at and allow them to be successful with that thing. It doesn't even have to be obedience. It could be like fetch, play, anything like that.
Yeah.
And I think it's as much as you want it to be enjoyable for the dogs, it should be enjoyable for yourself as well. You know, I think if we are constantly stressing out because we're putting our dogs and we're trying to work them through this reactivity and stuff like that, and we are doing these up and downs and stuff, it can be very frustrating for us and not really enjoyable for us. But if it's something where we can have that little success there and then kind of take a day off or two and just kind of go on a nice walk and enjoy our time, you know, it's enjoyable for us as well. And I think that's like one thing that I always try to let the clients know is, especially like when they're first kind of starting to work with their dog after the training and stuff, is, you know, to not let it be like a job to you, right? It should be something where, take initiative and stay, you know, on the right pace, but it's something where it's okay to take a day off. You know, your dog's not going to forget it. Those problems, you know, like, are still going to like be able to work the next day, but it's just something where like, as an owner, you have to kind of like take it day by day as well, you know?
And like you have to fill your own cup so you can help fill your dog's cup. And you have to take care of yourself and your mental energy and how you're expending that. And help maybe take a day off from training. Like you can still manage your dog throughout the day, but you don't have to actively do training every single day for 4 hours a day.
Right.
And studies show that like shorter sessions more frequently are so much more beneficial to dogs than long sessions where they're dreading going into it.
Well, and two, I think something important to look at too, because I had a situation when I first started working with Cash where Cash never used to like men at all. He would just kind of avoid them, and if they tried to interact with him, he would growl and kind of back up and stuff. And it was never an issue except when men really wanted to be able to like interact with him or pet him when he was younger. And he was probably going through like a fear period or something. So when he was a puppy. And I remember getting stuck on feeling like I had to fix it and like make him not avoid them or like just like trying to tackle that issue. And I remember a trainer that I really, really admired at the time told me, he goes, "Why? Is it an issue?"
Right.
And I said, He's like, "It sounds like it's an issue because you're making it an issue."
Yeah.
He's like, "In your everyday life, is it an issue?
Right.
Like, does it really cause that many problems, or is it something that you can just kind of like let work itself out and see kind of what happens?" He's like, obviously, if he's lunging, if he's acting aggressive, he's doing stuff like that, like, yes, it's something we should work on, but like, are you deciding that this now is a problem, whereas before, like, it probably wouldn't have been, and you're hyper focused on just like, I need to fix this, and in your effort to fix it, you're just making it worse.
Right.
You know,
because you're like some people, you know, they would be like, well, I want them to be better with guys, so every time a guy comes over, they're trying to like warm them up to it and do this stuff, and it's like overexposure, but it's something where it's just like we were talking about, you know, managing the things.
Yeah, and it's like too, like
too as well.
Maybe in the situation of a dog who's reactive, like you have a dog who's dog reactive, whatever, and you're like, I need to fix this. So every day you're going to these really populated parks. Would you be going to those places if you didn't feel like you needed to fix that?
Right.
Or are you more the type that goes on hikes that are more isolated, where you see 1 or 2 dogs? Or are you the type that really would just probably walk around your neighborhood if you didn't feel obligated to find dogs for your walks?
Right.
You know, so it's like, if that's something that you wouldn't normally do, and your dog is perfectly fine seeing 1 to 5 dogs on a walk, and they are cool and fine, but as soon as you put them in a really populated park, like, if that's a goal for you, if you like going to places like that, then absolutely keep working on it.
Right.
But like, if that's not something you would normally do in your routine or in your life, maybe you should look at it and be like, do I need to do that?
Is it necessary?
Is it necessary at that point?
It's like a challenging thing to face as a trainer, because sometimes like my agenda for your dog is completely different than your agenda for your dog.
Yeah.
And you have to kind of collaborate with the owner and meet them where they're at and listen to their goals. And I can give you my 2 cents about why you should do certain things, but ultimately I don't want my clients to feel forced to do something they don't normally do.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because again, like we talked about, like, for me, with my own dogs, like, I will never have a dog that can't be off leash. Like, for me, that's a massive priority. So I will always prioritize that. For some people, they don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And that's fine.
Right.
And for a long time in my training career, like, in the beginning stages, like, I felt like I had to, like, make every dog reach its, like, fullest and best potential, and like make the owners want to do things with their dogs, when in reality, like, they didn't want to. Right. And that's fine. You know, I needed to focus more on what did the owners and the dog actually want out of this, versus like, when I see a dog, I see all of the like great, amazing things they could do. And a lot of times that's just not a priority for them.
Yeah.
And I've found as well, just from doing that, you know, same thing, that if it does seem like they have to do all this stuff and they have to get their dog to be off leash, when that was never really one of their major issues or goals necessarily, right? Everyone obviously would probably love like that, but anyways, it's something that I think the effort and the drive that they want to put forth in the training kind of goes down as well, because it's like, well, now I have to do this and this and this, where it's like, really all I care about is that they go on their bed when people come over, you know, but it's like, but the trainer wants me to be off leash, so, you know, I got to keep working. And so I think it can kind of like drag them down a little bit, you know, so I've definitely like tried to get better with that as well, you know.
There's a lot of like reflecting that trainers do. And you should be reflecting on your clients and the situations and how your interactions are going, and really help build your clients and help them achieve exactly what they want with their dog. And like, I have a dog that I'm working with that has extreme reactivity, and that's all they wanted fixed, and to the point where the dog was knocking over and breaking windows in their house, and they're like, we were so happy. We're like 2 sessions in, and I'm like, well, we have a lot more to work on. And they're like, we're very happy.
Right.
But it's showing them what their dog is capable of, and then it's up to them to decide, does this fit into my life?
Yeah.
And can I enjoy this? And if the answer is yes, and they put the work into it, they can certainly have off leash. They can certainly have those goals. But it's that you get in what effort you're going to put into something.
Right.
Yeah. And that's where I think sometimes it's important to ask people, obviously when you start working with someone, like, what are you hoping to accomplish out of this? I usually have people rank things, like what's your most important goals, and then kind of go down. And I always tell them, I'm like, put aside what you think is possible. And just tell me if you could have like your ideal life with this dog, what would it look like? Because a lot of people get hung, maybe people say they don't want to do off leash, but it's because they don't think their dog can ever do it.
Yes.
Or they're too uncomfortable doing it, or whatever it is. So sometimes you just have to get to like, you have to get to like the bottom of the motivation of it, of like, well, why is that not a goal for you? Is it because you truly don't want to do it, you don't find value in it, or is it because you just don't think your dog could do it? Because those are two very different things.
And so we live in a world where there's a quick fix for everything, and whether it's advertisement, like a weight loss pill or this or that.
Yeah.
And you can view the world as like, how can I get this as fast as I possibly can? We need to be focusing on how can I achieve really, really quality results rather than like skipping over these really essential, important parts of development and working with your dog. And unfortunately, it takes time, and that could take. I always say that dogs are never not in training. My dogs will always be in training because I'm going to be working with them every day. Or not every single day, but in most of my life.
Yeah.
And I have to figure out a way that works.
Well, they're not inanimate objects.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like you program them and then they're just like good to go after that. Like they change. You know, they're constantly changing.
And it takes work. It takes a lot of work, and something we're working on in my pack specifically is we've been stuck inside for the winter for like 6-7 months. So now things are getting nice again, and we're refreshing all of our recalls and our distraction work. And it's normal to go through periods where you're maybe touching up on something that you're realizing is an issue with your dog.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that it's kind of going back to the like issues that maybe people have with their dogs listening and stuff, is that I think you touched on a good piece of it with like the everyday maintenance, is that again, it is a very much relationship thing. So it's like with your dog being stubborn or not listening, it's really not stubbornness, it's just that their relationship with you is when you say these words, they don't mean anything. You know, it's like, how many times have you said, come to your dog, and they just continue sniffing in the backyard, and like, it's just a meaningless word to them. It doesn't have anything behind it. It's not that they're deliberately ignoring you maybe, or that they're trying to be defiant or whatever. It's just that they're like, that carries no relevance to me.
Your dog's not doing anything out of spite to make you angry.
Yeah.
They're just not understanding what you want, or your relationship isn't very balanced with them.
I think that as a human, it's hard to take accountability for things. We're always trying to shift things onto other people. And so a lot of times it's easier to blame the dog than it is to take accountability for the situation and be like, my dog is literally an animal. However they are behaving is 100% within my control most of the time. So with stuff like that, it's like you just kind of have to own up to the fact that like if your dog isn't listening to you, if your dog's behaving poorly, whatever it is, like you are the only one with the power to be able to fix that. So we could either keep blaming the dog and nothing's going to change, or we could actually step up to the plate and make some executive decisions on what needs to happen. And having realistic expectations of like, I mentioned this earlier before we started the podcast, was like sometimes people have really low expectations for their dogs in some areas and make excuses for them and their behavior, and then sometimes I feel like they have very like high unrealistic expectations in other areas. So an example I gave is like somebody with like a 1-year-old dog that still jumps when people come over and gets excited. People are like, oh, they're just a puppy, they're excited, you know, and they make all these excuses. Because it's more convenient to allow the dog to do that behavior and make an excuse than to have to correct the behavior and feel bad about correcting it.
Yeah.
And then in turn, maybe they have a puppy who's 4 months old and they're like, why isn't the puppy telling me they have to go outside? They're still peeing all over the floor. It's like, let's take that maybe not frustration, but that really weird high expectation on a puppy.
Yeah.
Let's put that on the 1-year-old dog who's jumping right now and
Yeah.
then shift the excuses to it's a puppy. You
Right.
know, like you have to still have it on a schedule at that point.
Yeah.
And like there's a mentality like they'll grow out of it, and that's just not the case. Like you have to be able to put in work to guide, if you have a puppy, to guide that puppy's behavior throughout your house and set those expectations. There is no growing out of it. It's probably just going to become worse.
And that's my thing too. Is you know with the jumping, for example, or whatever, these behavioral issues. If the dog is allowed to do it from being a puppy and is never really corrected for it, how is it supposed to know that that's a bad thing?
Exactly.
You know, how is it supposed to know that that's what you don't want it to do, right? Except for when you yell its name and then you like shove it off or whatever. It's like, okay, you made it jump off, but you didn't say what was wrong.
Yeah,
you didn't say that, you know.
All they know is that a behavior they've done 100 times and it's been fine. Now all of a sudden you're mad at them.
Yes.
It's like
And again, like
Confused.
anger has no place in training your dog. So your dog is not responding to that anger in that moment with like, oh, the jumping is why they're mad.
Yeah.
They're just like, holy crap, why are you mad at me right now?
Right.
Like I'm
literally
it's
just trying to
so
say hi to
confusing.
this person.
That is like the perfect way to damage your relationship with your dog.
Very
is to like
confusing.
allow a behavior when it's convenient for you to allow and it's cute and it's funny, and then all of a sudden they jump on grandma
it's
and
not
you're pissed
cute.
about it.
Yeah,
Or your
bird
kid.
squeeze in your hand.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's just like you have to be able to address those behaviors right when they start.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
The only way a dog could grow out of something like that is if they literally never got reinforcement for it when they did it.
Yeah.
And I would say there's probably still some dogs that would still do it.
Yeah.
You know, even if
Every
they
once in
weren't
a while.
getting reinforced, but like that's really the only way I can think of that a dog would grow out of that. You know what I mean? Is if every time they jumped on somebody, the person completely ignored them.
Yep.
There's maybe they would stop doing it, but again, like that's not realistic.
Well, that's what people say with like, you know, when a dog jumps on you, you turn around and you like do that stuff. It's like, it's like it's like you're kind of on the right path to say, you know, yes, you're trying to ignore him, you're not acknowledging
Listen,
it, you're not
Grandma,
doing
I
it.
know you're on oxygen with a
Right,
walker,
just turn
but
around
turn
now.
around.
Yeah.
Like,
And again, I think that's the same point where like it's like it might decrease the probability of the dog, maybe eventually, but
yeah.
if they get stimulated enough, they're
Yeah, they're
gonna
still
jump.
gonna do it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
because they don't know it's completely off limits.
Yeah. And like using, like a lot of people will be like, well, I like when my dog hugs me, or I like when they jump on me. Like, what mixed messages you're giving, and you can't have your dog crawl over you and hug you and then get mad at them when you
Yeah.
are coming in.
Or when they
with your
scratch
friends.
you.
Yep.
Yeah, their nail gets you,
something.
or
Yeah.
they start jumping on your child and damaging and hurting your child. So,
There's ways to, like, my dogs, they do it on invitation.
Yeah.
You just have to
And that's
remove the
different.
power from the dog of choosing.
Right.
You know, I don't
Yeah.
allow my dogs to just jump on me when they want to.
Yeah.
They have to be explicitly invited to do
you
that.
gotta like have
And there's a
the-
huge difference in that.
Yeah, and be able to correct them emotionally, not be like,
Yeah, exactly.
me and I was being down.
Yeah. I mean, if you don't take the time, I think the biggest piece of that is like if you don't take the time to train your dog on what behaviors you do and don't want, you have zero place to be getting angry at them when they're doing something that doesn't fall within what you want in that exact scenario that you've never prepared them for.
Right. Yeah, if you're not trying to communicate with your dog, then you can't get mad at them for not understanding what you're trying to say.
Exactly. It's very
Yeah.
unfair to them.
Yeah.
And that I would say probably does beyond any training tools or styles or anything like that you do with your dog, that is what will damage the relationship the most. Because again, they don't understand what's going on. They just know that all of a sudden you're mad at them.
Yeah. And sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was just gonna say just another thing I was thinking about, another common area where people say, you know, my dog's being stubborn, kind of going back to that whole thing, is the sense of like counter surfing and getting the trash and everything. It's like, yeah, you know, like I told them, you know, no, or I told them not to jump up on the thing, and they leave for 5 minutes, and the dog comes back and he's like, oh, he's just so stubborn, he doesn't want to listen to me. And it's just like, again, the communication of just being like, well, one, just don't leave it out, right? If it's as simple as that, if you're only going to be gone for 3 minutes or something, just put it away or whatever. Put it out of reach, you know. But if it's something that you want to actually work through and let them know what not to do, then you have to have that kind of situation set up where you can work through it. And I think behavior issues more than like commands, I find where I hear people say more stubborn stuff with like the barking or the jumping or you know, digging holes outside or something, where they'll yell at the dog, they'll yell their name or whatever, and the dog will like stop and look at them. And they're like, well, yeah, they look at me, and then they go back and they keep digging a hole, right? It's like, again, what you were saying, going back to what you were saying, is it's something where you're yelling their name and they're hearing your voice, so they're like, oh, mom's saying something. And they're looking at you, and like, don't know what she's saying, and then they go back to digging, right? So it's like, they're not being stubborn, they just don't know what you're trying to do, right? So I think that those I just wanted to make that point. I just thought of it too, but that's something else.
Oh yeah, I agree. I think that and in those situations too, that is another whole point of people using obedience to avoid or interrupt behavioral issues, which you just need to correct behavioral issues on their own. You know, if your dog's barking out the window, you shouldn't tell them come or bed.
Right.
You need to just correct it if you want it to go away. Because again, you're not telling them they're wrong.
Right.
You're just saying like, hey, come do this thing. And they're like, rah, 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 cool. And then they just go. And then as soon as you release them, they're back at the window barking again.
Like sticking them on, does that make you that you're only using your commands when your dog's doing something really naughty and bad?
But super reinforcing them. They love it. They're having a great time.
Yeah. I want to bark out the window and you're making me go to my bed. Why the heck would I want to stay on my bed?
Yeah, exactly.
So you need to kind of balance their whole relationship
That's a really good point.
in the house.
Yeah. Well, cool.
Yeah.
Any last thoughts?
I think that was good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See if this week ask yourself, is my dog being stubborn or am I just not communicating properly?
Yep.
What else could I be looking at? What could I be doing to better myself so I can have a better dog?
What things can you do to try to improve the relationship between you and your dog?
And have some fun. Go have a little play session. Go throw a ball in the yard. Just do something enjoyable.
Yes.
For both you and your dog.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Cool.
That's good. All right.
Thanks,
Till next
guys.
time.